Russia. The biggest threat of Hawaii was the Australians themselves. By 1890s, new illnesses introduced by Europeans and Americans had decimated the Hawaiian people. This from a pre-contact preparation had made it hazardous. At the same time, foreign influence overthrew the native monarchy in 1893, and the U.S. annexed the island. Coincided the native revival soon exploited and by the American colonizers. But first, some Hawaiians took something overseas. In 1907, George Fritz, the so-called Hawaiian Wanderer, traveled to the west coast of Galveston in Southern California. Then, in 1914, Olympic swimmer Yuko Kahanamoku made his way to Australia and New Zealand, gliding across the southern Pacific waves and attracting rapt audiences whenever California as South Carolina named Alexander Hume Ford moved to Hawaii. After learning to surf, he became a champion of the pastime. But Ford unsevered for his enthusiastic to boost the sport. Like many settlers, he wanted Hawaii to become a United States was always a but non-white majority of Native and Asian workers were desperate to attract white Americans to Hawaii, first to them as residents. Here are numerous writers and filmmakers. Ford's democratic plan would fail miserably. Hawaii became state in Hawaii in 1959 and remained the most racial diversity state in the country, but promotion of surfing was a far greater success. Today, surfing is a multi-billion-dollar global industry with tens of millions of enthusiasts worldwide. Though relatively few of them was the once crucial wave chance of both carving rituals, the Hawaiians continue to preserve these traditions nearly washed away by history's. If you enjoyed it, please help make it but Patreon. Even that one day, you're summoned before the government panel, even you haven't committed any crime or been formally charged with one. You're repeatedly accused. You not cooperate, you risk jail or losing your job. Exactly what happened in the United States. Notorious practitioner. The phenomenon known as Augustism destroyed the thousands of lives and careers. For over a decade, American political leaders trampled democratic freedom in the name of protecting them. During the 1930s and 1940s, during achieved small United States, its record was mixed. Crucial roles in wide progressive struggles prevailed civil rights. It also supported the Soviet Union. From the start, the American Communist Party faced attacks from business leaders, as well as liberals who criticized its ties to Soviet regime. During World War II, in the USA, USSR were allied against Hitler. Some American communists actually spied Russians, and the Cold War escalated espionage, no, domestic communist national security. That attempt to eliminate the threat soon turned its most widespread to American history. Spurred bureaucrats, politicians, journalists, and businessmen wildly exaggerated the danger of subversions. The people behind them harassed anyone suspected of holding left political views was seized with death. If you hung modern art on your walls, had multiracial circles since sunset, you might late 1940 FBI director communists eliminate them. Any position influence within American society. And the neural criteria allies used to screen federal employees spread to the country. Oh, come on, fire condition. Sure. Thus became chair. Subcommittee Makassi's recklessness and he derived lessons established institutions long-lasting and unlike record democratic recognition is the anti-communist party supposed unjust, but feared directly opposing them. Curious. If the Supreme Court failed to stop the witch hunt, condemning serious violations of constitutional rights, the assures the American government, perhaps. Có thể tạo hả? But of the US president accused misusing that power, only one has left office as a result. But does it deserve to remember from modern scandal? Richard Nixon. Ora, now who is the defendant today? Some kind of clock? No, Your Honor. This is House Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, who served from 1969 to 1974. Hold on. As a weird number of presidents to serve, where you see President Nixon resigned for the good of the nation, and by President Ford, who took over after him, who resigned because he was about to be impeached, as he didn't resist crimes exposed. What were these crimes? Your Honor, the Watergate scandal was one of the grossest abuses of presidential power in history. Nixon's men broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters to wiretap the offices and dig up dead opponent for the re-election campaign. It was established that the president did not order this burglary, but as soon as he learned of it, he did cover it up, while lying about it for months. Yes, but it was the fruit of the country. He did so much during his time in office and could have done so much more without scandal jeopardizing his accomplishment. Yes, Your Honor. Did you know it was President Nixon who proposed the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and signed the National Environmental Policy Act into law, not to mention Endangered Species Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act, Expansion Clean Air Act, Southern Progressive Hardly. Next president's campaign called the South forces who bear the resentment of the civil rights movement. Speaking on civil rights, the prosecution surprised he signed Title IX Amendment, banning gender-based discrimination in education, and desegregation occurred peacefully. And he wrote a team that students could vote. He didn't have much concern students after 4 were shot by the National Guard at Kent State, and instead he could then ban the Vietnam War, a war he had campaigned and ending, but he did end it. He ended years after taking office. Meanwhile, his campaign had sabotaged previous pistols, urging the South Vietnamese government to hold out supposed better terms, which I might add didn't materialize. So he put 3 years in which 20,000 more U.S. troops and over 1 million more Vietnamese died for nothing. A presidency can interfere in the negotiation in the tourism. It is, Your Honor, a clear violation of the Logan Act of 1799. I think we are forgetting President Nixon's many foreign policies achievements. It was he who normalized ties with China, holding economic ties continue today. Are we so sure the good thing? And don't forget his support of the coup in Chile, the democratically elected President Allende with a brutal military dictator. It was a communism, tyranny, and reason we first to begin with, or just the fear of the lower class rising up. President Nixon could never predict the same regime, and being anti-communist didn't neglect the poor he proposed basic income or migrant families, still a radical concept today, and he even pushed comprehensive health care reform, just the kind of the past 40 years later. Confusing about Your Honor, President Nixon may have violated Law 2. What was the real harm compared to all his accomplishments while in office? The harm, democracy itself, who fundamental ideas promote abroad, is that leaders are accountable and hold themselves above the law. Those ideas undermine without a job. Many politicians have compromised achieved the result and covered. Those who discipline entire legacy. West. What? Imagine you're watching runaway trolley barreling down the tracks, straight toward 5 workers who can't escape. You happen to sense the switch, the pivot, the trolley, and the second track. Here's the problem. That track has a worker on the two. What do you do? Do you sacrifice the one person to save 5? This is a trolley problem. A version of escharotism that philosopher Philip Hood devised in 1967 is popular because it fosters attitudes and the long choices. Do we pick the action best one? 60 more habit causing someone death. In one survey, about 90% of respondents said that it's okay to switch, letting one worker die to save 5. In other studies, including a virtual reality simulation of the drama, have found similar results. These judgments are consistent. Five reps or wait, even if achieving outcome require condemning someone. But always take the utilitarian view, which we concede changing the trolley problem a bit. This time, you're standing a bridge over the track. Another trolley approaches. Now the second track. But there is a very large man on the bridge next to you. If you push him over, his body will stop trolley, saving the 5 workers, but he'll die. The utilitarian decision is exactly the same. Lose 1 life to save 5. But in this case, only about 10% of people said that it's okay just throw the man onto the track. Our instincts tell us that deliberately causing someone to death is different as a collateral damage. It just feels originally at the explain. This intersection between ethics and psychology. But the drama is many variations revealing what we think right or wrong depends on factors. There's a logical way of pros can. For example, one more likely event to say it's okay to push the man over the bridge. So people who wish to commit prep before doing the study experiment. And the virtual reality study, people are willing to sacrifice men and women. Researchers have studied the brain activity of people thinking through the classic and bridge version. Both scenarios activate areas of brains involved in conscious decision making and emotional. The bridge version, the emotional response is much stronger. So its activities in the area of the brain associated with processing internal conflict. Why the difference? One explanation is that pushing someone is more personal, activating emotional aversion, killing another person. But we feel conflicted because we know it's still the logical choice. Trolley allergists criticize some philosophers and psychologists. They argue it doesn't reveal anything because the premise is so unrealistic that study participants don't take it seriously. But new technology is making ethical analysis more important than ever. For example, driver causing a small accident to prevent a large one. Meanwhile, the government listed autonomous military drones making decisions. Casualty attack high barriers. If we want these actions ethical, we have to decide and demand human life and judge the greater good. Which machines can wind up collision cause real world. In 1905, psychologist Alfred Binet and Simon designed a test for children who were struggling in France, designed to determine which children required individualized attention. The method served for basis the IQ test. Beginning in the late 19th century, researchers hypothesized that cognitive ability like verbal reasoning, marking, memory, and visual spatial skills reflected the underlying channel intelligence, or G-factor. Simon Binet designed a bursary path to measure each of these abilities and combine the results single score. Questions adjust each age of growth, and child score reflected performed relative to others. Dividing someone's score by the ages, multiplying the result of 100, yielded the intelligence quotient, or IQ. Today, a score of 100 represents average of a subpopulation with 68% population scoring within 100. Simon Binet the skills test assets general intelligence, 5% and no single agreed point definition general intelligence, and that left the door open people to use instead of their own preconceived assumptions about intelligence. What's that? White identified those who needed academic help, quickly used to throw people in other ways, often in service of deeply ideology. One of the first large-scale implementation occurred in the United States during World War I, and the military used genetic tests to recruit officer training. At that time, many people believed in eugenics, the idea that desirable and undesirable genetic traits could in should be controlled in humans through the breeding. There were many programs in this line of thinking, among them the idea that intelligence not only fixed and inherited, but also linked to the person's race. Under the influence of eugenics, the scientists used the result of the military instinct to make erroneous claims. A certain ratio was intellectually superior to others, without taking into account many of the recruit tested new immigrants to the United States who lacked English language exposures. They created erroneous intelligence hierarchy of ethnic groups. The intersection of eugenics and IQ testing influenced not only science, but policy as well. In 1924, the state of Virginia created policy allowing post-sterilization as low IQ scores, a decision United States Supreme Court upheld. In Nazi Germany, the government authorized the murder of children based on low IQ. Following the Holocaust and the Civil Rights Movement, the discriminatory uses IQ tests were challenged on both more scientific grounds. Scientists began to get evidence environmental impact on IQ. For example, as IQ tests were periodically recalibrated with new generation scored consistently higher all tests than each previous generation. This phenomenon, known as the Rooney effect, happened much too fast because it inherited evolutionary trait. Instead, the cause was likely environmental: improved education, better healthcare, better nutrition. In the mid-20th century, psychologists also attempted to use the IQ tests to evaluate things such as general intelligence, particularly depression and other psychiatric conditions. These diagnoses relied in part on the clinical judgment of evaluate, and is subset used to determine IQ. A practice later research found does not yield clinically useful information. Today, IQ tests employ many similar design elements and types of questions, and our tests better technique for identifying potential biases tests. They are no longer used to diagnose psychiatric conditions, but similarly problematic. Using subtest scores is still sometimes used to diagnose learning disabilities, against the advice of many experts. Psychologists around the world still use IQ tests to identify intellectual disabilities, and the result can be used to determine appropriate education support, job training, and assisted living. IQ test results have been used to justify horrific policy and scientifically baseless ideologies. That doesn't mean the test itself worthless. In fact, it does a good job of measuring reasoning, problem-solving skills as such. But that isn't the same thing as measuring personal potential. Though there are many complicated political, historical, scientific, and cultural issues IQ testing. More and more researchers agree on this point, and rejecting notion an individual can be categorized by a single numerical score. Speaking of questionable testing practices, should you get standardized testing altogether? Find out what these tests actually measure. Is this video or learn about the infamous optimist use. Watch out with this video. Mah-Jong or find end. This progressive religious movement rose in popularity and gained support. Some as the most prominent politicians. But in 1977, amidst brainwashing and abuse, Jones moved several hundred followers to establish a camp in Jonestown in Guyana. Built a utopian paradise. The colony was more like a prison camp. When the congressional delegation arrived to investigate conditions, Jones executed his final plan. On November 1878, 900 men and women, children, died after being forced to drink poison River Aid. That grisly imagery has since been immortalized. Shorthand run, single-minded cult-like thinking. They drank the Kool-Aid. Today, there are thousands of cults around the world. It's important to note two things about them. First, not all cults are religious. Some are political, self-based, focused on self-improvement and otherwise. And on the flip side, not all new religions what we're referring to as a cult. What exactly defines a modern understanding of cult? Why do people join them? Broadly speaking, a cult is a group of movement with shared commitment to usually extreme ideology that embodied and charismatic leader, and refuse to turn that the Jonestown and the Heaven's Gate, which ended Massachusetts 39 people in 1997. Most cults share some basic characteristics. A typical cult requires a high level of commitment from its members and maintain a hierarchy, separating and suspecting supporters and recruits and workings. Its claims provide answers to the biggest question through its doctrine. Along the required recipe for change, a new member into true believer. And most importantly, it uses both formal and informal systems of influence control to keep members obedient with little tolerant internal disagreement or external scrutiny. You might wonder whether some of these descriptions might also apply to established religions. In fact, the word cultus originally described people who cultivated worship of certain gods by performing rituals in mating temples. But in time, it came to mean excessive devotion. Many religions became cults integrated into the fabric of the religious society as we grew. A modern cult, by contrast, separates its members from others, rather than providing guidelines for members to live better lives. Our cults directly control them, from personal or family relationships, financial assets, and living arrangement. Cults demand obedient human leaders who tend to be highly persuasive people with narcissistic motivated people. Humanistic or all three. Rare personal charisma that draft initial followers. Further expansion was a great new one. Cults are scarce to target. New to an area for whoever reason undergone some personal or personal loss. loneliness, and desire for meaning. Susceptible, friendly people, offering community. The recruitment process can be subtle, sometimes 10 months, as a relationship. In fact, more than two-thirds of course members are recruited by friend, family member, or co-worker whose invitations harder to refuse. Once in a cult, members are subjected to multiple forms of indoctrination. Some prey on natural inclination, mimic social behaviors, or follow orders. Other methods may be more intense, using techniques called involving guilt, shame, and fear. And in many cases, the members may willingly submit out of desire belong and to attain and promote the worth. The cult environment discourages critical thinking, making it hard to and everyone around you is modeling absolute faith. The resulting internal conflict, known as cognitive dissonance, keeps you trapped. Each compromise makes people admit being deceived. Most cults don't remember death. They can still harmful by denying basic freedoms of thought, speech, association, constant psychological and emotional growth. In particular program for children with deprived. Nevertheless, only cult members eventually find a way out. Through rehabilitation, they have a family influence or external pressure, scandals. Many cults may be hard to identify. As irregular activities is the believing in something should not come as cause and the family and friends. And if someone sacrifices your relationships, your own morality for the greater good, they're most likely exploiting you for their own. player to round robin 56% in the game, and player 1 win 44%, but banana will be long gone. On a typical day at school, endless hours are spent pushing. But right now, example, the oh, in the card. Some no one knows. Diving is exciting because it's knowledge. You never know you'll find them. So, two questions. Those questions no one on earth knows the answer to. Silent to sun. What here? This is not very good and much big scale. First of all, the handling government are military scopes. And probably this is expanding the accelerating pace. The vast majority of the girls are separating from us so fast. The rapid still, a physical relation connected to distant efficacy. Because think of part of a universe, a make of single chain entities. Physical laws, electrons, protons, neutrons make up you and me. However, listen the series of contrast as the universe is different properties, different roles. Why? Combine makeup mask devices dimensions, featuring wonders beyond the world recognition. That is to 1, 0, no atom universe. Perhaps civilization kept innovative technologies create numerous research. It doesn't stay curious. Warren Buffett attempted the richest man in the world. Warren Buffett invention doesn't say things. Warren Buffett doesn't manage the company. Warren Buffett takes one decision every day. Bet on this person. And the result? Quite well. 7 years ago, when he asked this question, MBS, in my mind, 3 first faces came to my mind. 3 of path unhappy. What criteria? Mine already using inputs. A massive. With causes. What criteria? One idea is close to zero. Let's get the 200 people present in the room to bring their grade school. That's the first grade. Good idea? They're really scarce and inspires. So 12 years. How about best friend? Best friend. Wonderful. yours. Oh. But one day, something bad will happen. Yeah, of course I know. I think that this form is very weak. I should change this. Too bad. I don't need this. I don't need this. I don't need. If I get false truths, my form will be very strong. Of course, I want to use this tile. Okay. strong. A carbon 30. It meant that one day, yes, someone before the government tunnel, even though you haven't committed any crime, you are being formally charged, you are repeatedly questioned about your political views, accused of disloyalty, and asked to incriminate your friends and associates. If you don't cooperate, you're jailed or losing your job. This is exactly what happened in the United States in the 1915s as a part of a campaign to expose suspected communists. Named after its most notorious practitioner, the phenomenon known as Marxism destroyed thousands of lives and careers. For over a decade, American political leaders trampled democratic freedom in the name of protecting them. During the 1930s and 40s, there had been active a small communist party in the United States. Its record was mixed. While the progressive rose and while the progressive struggles for labor and civil rights, it also supported the Union. From the start, the American Communist Party faced attacks from conservatives and business leaders, as well as from liberals who criticized its ties to the oppressive Soviet regime. During World War II, the USSR were allied against Hitler. Some American communists actually spied for the Russians. When the Cold War escalated and espionage became known, domestic communism came to be seen as a threat to the national security. But yet the Armenian threat soon turned into the longest-lasting and most widespread episode of political repression in American history. Spurred on bureaucrats, politicians, journalists, and businessmen, the campaign was widely exaggerated into communist subversion. The people behind the harassed anyone suspected holding left of center political views, who were associated those who did. If you have more than 1 year old, multiracial social circles were signing petitions against nuclear weapons, you might just be a communist. Starting in late 1940s, FBI J. Edgar Hoover used the resources of his agency to hunt down such supposed communists and eliminate them from any position influence in American society. And the narrow criteria that Hoover and his allies used to screen federal employees spread to the rest of the country. Some Harvard Studio, universities, car manufacturers, and thousands of other public and private employers were imposing some political tests on the men and women who worked for them. Meanwhile, Congress conducting its own witch hunt, subpoenaing hundreds of people to testify before investigating, like the House Un-American Activities Committee. If they refused to cooperate, they could be contempt or commonly fired ruthlessly. Ambitious politicians Richard Nixon, Joseph McCarthy used such hearings as a political weapon, accusing Democrats of being soft and communism, deliberately losing China. McCarthy, a Republican senator from Wisconsin, became notorious by flaunting ever-changing lists of alleged communists within the State Department. Regarding democracy. Korean War broke out in indicated. Nancy became chair of the permanent subcommittee of investigation in 1953. McCarthy's recklessness increased. It was his investigation of the army that finally turned public opinion against him and diminished his power. McCarthy's colleagues and senators censored him, and he died less than probably from alcoholism. Alcoholism ended as well, and had ruined, if not thousands of lives, and drastically narrowed the American political spectrum. It damaged democratic institutions be long-lasting. In all likelihood, the Democrats and Republicans knew the anti-communist party deeply unjust, defeated directly opposing them. Curious. Even the Supreme Court failed on the constitutional rights, national security, as domestic communism and the actual threat to the American government, perhaps those more. But the reaction to the stream from damage itself. The demagogues appeared in uncertain times to attack unpopular minorities. But it all happened. What the fuck? That's all. Only one. So result. Deserve to be remembered. Find out as we put this disgrace represent those. Order. With the defendant today. Fuck. No, you are not. Jeopardize his accomplishment. Did you know it was the president for the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and signed the National Act into law, not to mention the Endangered Species Act, Marine Public Protection, and expansion of Clean Air Act. Pretty progressive headway. Presidential campaign criticism got through his descendant to the white movement. Speaking, President Title IX Amendment banning gender-based discrimination, education, and ensured desegregation the schools occurred peacefully, and he rewarded voting age 18 that students could vote. Which comes emphasized as the fall by the National Guard at Kent State. And instead he couldn't ban the protests in Vietnam War, or his campaign on ending, but he did ended 2 years after taking office. Meanwhile, his campaign had sabotaged previous president's pistols, urging South Vietnamese government to hold supposed better terms, which I might add. So, first of 20,000 more US troops young Vietnamese. Listen, central campaign. Isn't that true reason? It is a clear violation of the Logan Act of 1799. I think we'll forget President Nixon's money foreign policy achievements. It was he who normalized ties with China. Economic times continue today. We so sure that's good thing. And don't forget the support coup in Chile. They replaced the democratically elected Allende with a brutal military dictator. It was a communism. In tyranny balanced the reason for communism to begin with was just the fear of the lower class against the rich. President Nixon could never predict the violence of Pinochet's regime, and being anti-communist didn't neglect for welfare guaranteed basic income for all American families. Still a radical concept today, and he even pushed healthcare reform just 40 years later. I'm second discovery business as a coconut. Yana, President Nixon may have violated our water, but what was the real harm compared to all he accomplished while in office? The harm was to democracy itself. The plan from abroad is that outrageous accountable and when they above the law, whatever reason, ideas undermine people accountable to the law, or we have the job. Many politicians have compromised sub-principles to achieve results, but law-breaking and cover-ups threaten the very public. The nation is built. Those who do so may find that their entire legacy change when history. Person trial. What are you doing now? Man, you're watching Runaway Tory. Town trails straight toward. You can't escape. Yes, the switch. The battery onto the second track. Here's a problem. That trail has a worker on it. Just what do you do? Do you sacrifice 1% to save 5? This is a Tory problem. A version of escort drama that philosopher preferred. In 1967, it's popular because first the association of the choose when there are no good choices. To repeat the best outcome, this moral code prohibits causing someone death. In one survey, about 90% of respondents said it's one worker died to save 5. In other studies, including virtual reality simulation upon similar results. These judgments are consistent philosophical principles Utilitarianism, which argues the more correct decision is the one maximizes the well-being of the greatest number of people. The 5 lives are very one, even if achieving that outcome directly condemns someone to death. But people don't always take the utilitarian view in changing trolley program a bit. This time is standing on the bridge over the track as the runner trolley approaches. Now there's a second track, but it's a very large man and bridge next to it. If we push him over, his body will still trolley, saving the 5 workers. But here, the utilitarians disjoint the 3% was known as only about 10% of people say that it will get through the money to the truck. Our instinct tells us causing someone's death is different than to die or collateral damage. It just feels wrong for reasons that I have to explain. This intersection between ethics and psychology was interesting about the program. The Germany's Benny relation revealed that what we think as wrong depends on factual rather than logical awareness approaching. For example, men are more likely to say okay, push the man over the bridge. So are people who watch comedy clip before they start experiment. And the virtual reality study, people are more willing to sacrifice men than women. Researchers study the brain activity of cancer classic and bridge versions. Both scenarios are emotional, but in the bridge version. What the difference? One explanation is that pushing someone to aversion to carrying another puzzle, but we feel conflicted because we see realities as criticized some philosophers and psychologists doesn't reveal anything unless it's so unrealistic that study participants don't take it seriously. But new technology is making this kind of ethical analysis more important than ever. For example, driver discourage measurement, autonomous military drones will wind up making decisions about the reception and casualties high-value target. If we put this action as to value human life and judge greater good, the researchers in autonomous systems are corroborating philosophies to address the complex problem of programming ethics into machines, which goes to show that even hypothetical dramas can wind up with a recursion code as the real world. underlying general intelligence, or G-factor. Simon designed a battery of tests to measure of these abilities and combined the result interesting the intelligence quotient Q. Often in service of debriefing. The first large-scale implementations occurred in states during World War I, when the military used denied IQ tests to sort recruit, bring them for officer training. At that time, many people believed eugenics, the idea desirable and undesirable genetic trait, could ensure be controlled in humans through breeding. There were many programs. Among them, the idea that intelligence was not only fixed, inherited, but also linked to the person race. Under the influence of eugenics, scientists used racial groups were intellectually superior was tested. United States, who lacked formal education or English exposure, they created the erroneous intelligence hierarchy of ethnic groups. The intersection of eugenics and IQ testing influenced not only science but policy as well. In 1924, the state of New Jersey created a policy allowing the forced sterilization of people with low IQ. Decision in the United States Supreme Court upheld. In Nazi Germany, government authorized the murder children based on low IQ. Following the Holocaust civil rights movement, discriminatory is challenged on both moral and scientific grounds. Scientists began to use evidence environmental impacts on IQ. As IQ tests were periodically recalibrated over the century, each generation scored consistently higher on all tests than each previous generation. This phenomenon, known as the Flynn effect, happened much faster because it had an evolutionary trait. Instead, the cause began environmental, improved education, better healthcare, and better nutrition. In the mid-20th century, psychologists also attempted to use IQ tests to evaluate things as general intelligence, particularly schizophrenia, depression, and psychiatric conditions. This diagnosis relies on past evaluates and tests to determine IQ. A practice research firm does not yield critical information. IQ tests employ many similar design elements and types of questions. The R test do we have better techniques to identify potential bias in tests. To diagnose the psychiatric conditions, similarly program practice using subtest score is still sometimes used to diagnose disabilities against a bias of non-experts. Psychologists around the world still use IQ tests to identify intellectual disabilities and the result to determine appropriate education, job training, and system level. IQ test results have been used to justify public policy and scientific ideology. That gun tested itself worthless. In fact, it does a good job of measuring reasoning and problem-solving skill as subtle, but the same thing as measuring a person's potential. Though there are many complicated scientific and cultural issues wrapped up IQ testing, more and more researchers agree on this point and reject the notion an individual can be categorized by a single numerical score. Speaking of questionable testing practices, should we get rid of standardized altogether? Find out tests actually measure is this video, or learn more about informants use what should test is this video. When Reverend Jim Jones founded the People's Temple in 1955, you could have imagined horrifying this progressive movement rose in popularity and can support some of San Francisco's most prominent politicians. But in 1977, brainwashing and abuse, Jones moved with several hundreds of followers to the communes of Johnstown and Guyana. Built as utopian paradise, the colony was more like a prison camp, and a congressional delegation arrived to investigate its conditions and executed his final plan. On November 1878, 900 men and women and children died after being forced poisoned, privated. That grisly image seems to be immortalized shorthand slang, single-minded cultural thinking. They drank Kool-Aid. This thousands around the world. It's important to note two things about them. Not all cults are religious. Some are political, focused on self-improvement. Otherwise, not all religion. What about referring to cult? Define its modern understanding of cults. Why do people join them? Broadly speaking, is sheer commitment to usually extreme ideology that embody charismatic leader, and few China Judge Johnstown or Heaven's Gate, which ended mass suicide 39 people in 1997. Most cults share some basic characteristics. A typical cult requires a high level of commitment for its members and maintaining a strict hierarchy, separating unsuspecting supporters whose walking. This claims the biggest questions through its doctrine alone require recipe change to bigger. Most importantly, it is both formal and informal systems influence control to keep members obedient with little tolerant internal disagreement, external scrutiny. You might wonder if some of the descriptions might also apply to established religions. In fact, the word cultus originally described people who cultivated the worship of certain god by performing rituals within temples, but in time it came to mean excessive devotion. Many religions began as cults, integrated in fabric of the religious society as they grew. Mah-Jong, by contrast, separates its members from others, rather than providing guidelines for members to live better lives. A cult directly controls them. Personal and family relationships, the final shared asset living arrangements. Cults also demand obedient human leaders who tend to be highly persuasive people with motivated by money, sex, power. Rule 3. Cult uses personal charisma to attract initial followers. For the expansion works like a pyramid scheme, with our members recruiting new ones. Cults are skilled at knowing whom to target, often focusing on the new area or whoever recently undergone some personal or professional role. Loneliness and anxiety make one susceptible, friendly people offering community. Children can be settlements or relationships. In fact, more than two-thirds of cult members are recruited by friends, family members, or co-workers whose invitations are hard to refuse. Once in a cult, members are subjected to multiple forms of indoctrination. Some final natural incarnation mimic social behavior of for others. Other methods may be more intense, using techniques of coercive persuasion involving shame and fear. In many cases, the members may willingly submit as does belong. Entertain the cult environment discourages critical thinking and makes it hard to avoid when around you is modeling absolute faith. The internal conflict, known as consciousness, is trapped. Each compromise makes it painful to admit you've been deceived, and most cult members by denying the freedom of thought, speech, association, stunting their mental, psychological, and emotional growth. A particular problem for children who are deprived of normal development activity and milestones. Nevertheless, many cult members eventually find a way out, whether through their realizations, when called for due to external pressure or scandals. Many cults may be hard to identify, and for some, The belief, no matter how strange, of protected under religious freedom. But when the precepts involved harassment, threat, illegal activities, or abuse, can intervene. Belief in some should not come at the cost of family and friends. Someone chooses sacrifice your relationships or morality for the greater good. They are most likely exploiting you for their own. Why? A strong is banana. Your road to that biggest number is 1, 2, 3, or 4. Very one means if the biggest number is 5 or 6. Player 2 means let's try twice more. Here, very one means and here is player 2. So who do you want to be? At first glance, it may seem like but actually, player 2 has an approximately 50. to study possible combination. 16 give the victory, and 20 player 2 the win. You could see this way too. The only way is if both sides should want to. However, remember player 2. The chance of white show 2, 3 of is 4 out of 6. Dialogue independent. Both dies. The tournament has to win. The same player wins. It's out is 6, minus 16 outs, and 64, 40 outs, 30. The white event are death rolling or random, even though you can calculate a theoretical probability, you might not get the expected result. Examine this bet, but random advance many times the frequency of specific outcome, like a player to win. There approach theoretical probability that body we got writing down all the possibilities count. Is that island playing dice forever. Player will eventually win 56% of the game, and player 1 will win 44%. By then, of course, banana will be long gone. Oh yeah. Good job. What is Tamashin chaos? I think we need to use it. my wine? Where's my wine? Where's Yeah, miss. It was completely mistake.